right, let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Racha Kodash. Welcome, all right, to another live lesson. The name of this one is Turmoil, Chaos, and Dissension. And pretty much, this is based off of, different talking points that are going on different, channels, Nima, Midas Touch, these different ex-military members. The Elder Malcolm did a video touching on certain points, and dealing with these certain high officials in the military refusing certain orders from Trump, to go to this war, this battle, and pretty much it's causing turmoil, chaos, and dissension, because if that goes unchecked, what's going to happen with that is that that's going to spread, because it's going to embolden other individuals to do the same, because the thing is, when you're in the military, you're under an oath, and if you don't follow that oath, you're in what they call insubordinate, and pretty much they can lock you up, at Leavenworth, or whatever other military jails they may have for individuals that refuse orders, or they can get a dishonorable discharge, and so on and so forth. There's a whole lot to it. I'm not an expert on it. So, it got me thinking, about different scriptures, because I've been wanting to get into Isaiah 19 and a couple of other scriptures, but sometimes you may have an idea for a lesson, but you got to wait for the Spirit to just, come in and just, let it loose. Because then when the Spirit kicks in, everything flows freely. So sometimes you may have an idea for a lesson, but it may not be ripe just yet. You just have to let it, sometimes you may have to let it sit, or sometimes you just jump right on in and let the Spirit lead you where it will. So what I want to start off with first is the word insubordinate. So insubordinate describes a person who refuses to obey authority, acts disobediently, or defies orders. So you have individuals within the military, high-ranking officials. I don't know their names or their ranks, but I heard it before. I heard Elder Malcolm bring it out. I've heard other sources say the same thing, that you have these military men that are refusing these orders to go to this war. This is why you had those individuals. I believe that was a submarine, where they found actually shirts and different clothes inside the toilets, clogging up the pipes, because they know that this war is bullshit and that it's unlawful, it's unauthorized. And some of those top military men have even quoted, certain law, that shows that these things that Trump is doing are against the Constitution. Which they don't follow the Constitution anyway, but you have some of these men that are standing up to Trump and this wicked regime, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and so on and so forth. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen. This is fresh, so it's and then from what they're saying is you have squads and platoons that are jumping on board with the same attitude. Because here it is, you're going over there, this madman that never went to war, never been to war, he never signed up, he never thought of, he draft dodged and everything, and now here it is, he's in office going crazy, and he wants to send you over there to get your ass blown to bits. He's not going to be on the front line. His son ain't going to be on the front line. None of his family members are going to be on the front line, but he wants you to go over there and risk your life for a war that's against the law. He's broken that's why even your own allies are stepping away from you, because they see that this is wicked, and then this is not pretty much the move of a wise ruler. This is pretty much the move of desperation, and also the move of coercion, because of blackmail. We believe it's strictly done through blackmail. because you have those files, that are people want to see what's going on, and they let certain stuff leak out, but not the whole spiel. And that's why the majority of the Senate House is against those files coming out, because the majority of those senators and politicians are on those, on those files. And that's the reason why, because Epstein was a small hat, and that's the reason why these devils, going back to the movie Skull and Bones, which they showed you that they pretty much, have pictures and testimonies and video and stuff on an individual doing certain things, whether it's a crime or some type of lewd sexual act, so that they could use it later for leverage, or blackmail, in case the person doesn't want to play ball. You see? So it's a whole, when you're dealing with Esau, is just like there's no honor. Like they say, there's no honor among thieves. There's no honor, among these Edomites. It sort of reminds me too of the movie, it's the Battlefield Earth, with John Travolta and Forrest Whitaker. Where they show those tall people supposed to be the angels. Even though they were pretty much showing some wicked shit. But this is what they do. They constantly record each other. Get information, from individuals secretly, so that they could use it against them later. It's a dog-eat-dog world. So it says, insubordinate describes a person who refuses to obey authority, acts disobediently, or defies orders. And what does that mean? That means that there's a division there. It is commonly used to describe rebellious, defiant, or mutinous behavior in workplace or hierarchical settings. Common causes include poor communication or disagreement with management, while consequences often involve formal discipline or termination. And in the case of the military, it requires, jail time, right? And what that's going to cause, it's causing a division. And like Yahushua said, it's going to cause a civil war. So now, what is a civil war? A civil war is a high-intensity, sustained armed conflict occurring with a single country between organized groups such as the government and insurgents of rival factions. Remember the Apostle Tahar been saying there's going to be race wars, there's going to be, class wars. You're going to have individuals that's going to go against their government, which they're going to be charged with sedition, but, pursuant to the Constitution, which we don't really go by that, but, this is what this is supposed to be the supreme law of the land. Somebody was just going over that. We used to go over that years ago, Marbury versus Madison. That's like one of the top case law that is used to prove that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But they don't follow that. So they're not, they're divided because there are laws in place that are not being followed, and that's the reason why there are provisions within the Constitution that when the government becomes wicked or tyrannical or something like that, the people have the right and the power to arm themselves and take them down and put up rulers that are going to be fit for that. You see? So this is what these devils are preparing for. But now that they got such a great military, people can't do, and overthrow the government to set up and establish a righteous government. But there's no such thing here under the Edomites. It says these conflicts are fought over control of the state, secession, or government policy, often resulting in significant casualties and frequently international intervention. So we start off with this scripture, Mark 3:24, which the first time I heard this particular scripture in the NLT was the elder Karatas out there in Vegas, and I think it's good for this lesson. Mark 3:24, and if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And when we go to the NLT, a kingdom divided by what? Civil war will collapse. So there's a division, and that division is caused by civil strife. And that's why before I'm going to get this, and then we're going to go to 2nd Ezra's. Kingdom divided. We go to the word divided, you have the word merizo. Like you have the word merizo, you have the word meridian. right? You have AM, PM, ante-meridian, post-meridian. Ante-meridian means before midday. Post-meridian means after midday. That's why AM is in the morning, PM is in the afternoon. And what separates it, the middle of that is what? Noon. So before noon, afternoon. All right? Merizo comes from the root meros, it's a part, portion. Here it says to divide, see, to separate into parts, cut into pieces. So when you have something that's completely united, it works better because there's more power behind it. But when you have something that's divided, it doesn't work as efficiently because you have different interests and different individuals bumping heads. So you can never come to a solid conclusion, causing division, causing failure, causing collapse. It says to divide into parties, you know, there go your class wars. An example, be split into factions, right? And there's no coincidence that you have a two-party system here in America, Democrats, Republicans, like you had in Rome, because America is nothing more than a revival of the ancient Roman Empire, you know, which is a bipartisan, which is a two-party state, if you will. It says to distribute a thing among people, bestow upon. So this is going into something different. This is to divide in portions. But this here is what we want, to divide into parties. An example, be split into factions. So a nation like America, divided, you know, by civil war, will collapse. So it's going to fall. It can't stand. Let's see what it says for cannot stand. Cannot, the word for stand is histemi, which is to stand, to cause, to make, to stand, to place, right? So when you have the word cannot, is dunamai, to be able, have power, whether by virtue of one's own ability and resources or of a state of mind, through favorable circumstances, or by permission of law or custom. See, so they're divided by what? By civil war. You know, they can't come to the conclusion because you have those that know the law, but they're not following the law. To be able to do something, to be capable, strong, and powerful, so it cannot stand. So this unity cannot stand because there's a division, and that division is causing decay, it's causing turmoil, it's causing chaos, it's causing dissension. All right? Matter of fact, let's look up the word dissension. Dissension is a strong, often public disagreement or partisan conflict, which is a party, that causes discord, division, or hostility within a group, such as in politics, a workplace, or an organization, in this case politics, the American government. It generally results from conflicting ideas, intense arguments, or a lack of unity, leading to broken friendships, weakened morale, and strained relationships. And that's what's happening. It's falling, it's faltering. Why? Because there's a division. Why? Because the Lord said there will be a division. Because these are part of the signs that we are to look for, that this system is about to collapse. So in 2 Ezra 15 and 14, it says, woe to the world and them that dwell therein. Matter of fact, I don't think I have the GNT. So let me just pull up the GNT real quick. I'm going to come right back to this. I want to pull up the KJVA GNT online. Is this it? This is not the GNT. KJVA, that's its official. Here we go. Good News Translation. Oh, by the way, I picked up a hard copy of the NLT just so I can have it. So GNT, right? We're gonna go to. I wanted to. Okay, this one doesn't have the Apocrypha. Let's just do this. Okay, here we go. Matter of fact, let me just save this. All right. It's the only thing I don't like about this one is a lot of fucking pop-ups. All right, so let's go to 2nd Ezra's 15. And 14. Oh, come on, man. Thought it was not gonna. Oh, boy. Fucking devils. I just did that, asshole. Fucking devils, man. All right, so 2nd Ezra 15 and 14. Oh, you're hitting it. So you're gonna give me all these fucking ads. No, you rough rat bastards. Salakia. The world and the people in it are doomed. That's right. The day of doom is the end of the world. That's what we're coming to. The war that will bring their destruction is very near. Nation will arm themselves and fight against other nations. Right? And we see that happening right now. There will be great political turmoil. And this is what we're seeing right now, great political turmoil. With one group trying to overpower another and gain control, while ignoring the legitimate government. And this causes what? Civil war, dissension, sedition, you know? And then the King James, right? It says in the 15th verse, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up to fight against another, and swords in their hands, for there shall be sedition among men. So what is sedition? It's pretty much the same as dissension. Sedition is the act of inciting insurrection. So what these couple of, I'm not sure if they were generals or colonels, they were high-ranking officials did in refusing orders, is pretty much spreading, inciting other, military members to take the same stance. They were saying, I forget if it was Nima, if it was Midas Touch, or if it was the Elder Malcolm that was playing the video. I believe it was the Elder Malcolm, because I saw the video last night, before I went to bed. And I believe that's what it was. It was that video on Arrows of Indignation. Arrows of Indignation. Yeah, this is the one I was watching. So yeah, it's that video. Here it goes. I believe this was the one.
For the first time in years, the United States National Guard officers are straight up refusing President Trump's orders. They're saying this is not what we signed up to do. And honestly, they're definitely fucking right. So here's what's going on, y'all. Trump ordered the National Guard to help ICE patrol the streets of Chicago, right? basically using the military troops to enforce immigration raids right here on American soil. But two officers had a big problem with that. Staff Sergeant Timmy Palachek and Captain Dylan Blaha. They both said, fuck no. They're flat out refusing to follow that order. They're saying it goes against the community and against the Constitution. One of them said it flat out feels illegal. The other said, I signed up to protect the people, not to kidnap them.
Right, so it wasn't the war in Iran, so that was my bad. It was, to send ICE agents out there. But, it's going to keep spreading, regardless, because, they know that war that they're fighting over there in Iran was not done properly.
Hey, they know the risk too, man. Refusing a direct order could mean prison time, or court-martial, or even felony charges. But they said they would rather stay on the right side of history than become a part of something that feels wrong. When soldiers start refusing orders because they think the government is crossing the line, that's when you know something's starting to shift, man.
Yeah, that's the Civil War. That's the tension setting up Civil War.
Hello.
And I'm not sure if it was her that brought it out, that it was spreading among the other troops, in these different, and these other different groups of the military.
Hello, y'all. It's Janine J. Sings. I want to read something to y'all about our military right now.
So it is also the war. Yeah, this is it too. All right. I knew I heard it, but I wasn't sure. Salak, yeah?
And this crazy war over oil and stuff. So, what I'm reading is, in an unprecedented act of defiance, active duty U.S. Army soldiers at multiple bases across the United States and overseas have begun openly refusing orders to deploy to the escalating war against Iran, publicly denouncing the conflicts as illegal and unconstitutional, and declaring they will not participate in what they call an illegal war of aggression. Videos and statements circulating from Fort Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty, Fort Hood, Fort Campbell, and several overseas posts show soldiers in uniform stating variations of, this is not a defensive war. There is no imminent threat to the homeland. Congress never declared war. We will not deploy to kill and die for oil, politics, or foreign lobbies. We swore...
You know what it means by foreign lobbies? Those small hats.
Oath to the Constitution, not to endless wars. I applaud them.
So pretty much you get the idea, So, there's a great division. That's what we read here in, we read here in 2nd Ezra's 15 and 16 in the GNT. There will be great political turmoil, with one group trying to overpower another and gain control while ignoring the legitimate government. Why? Because the legitimate government is not governing properly. And when we go to the KJV in the same verse 16, for there shall be sedition among men. And we're reading about sedition. Sedition is the act of inciting insurrection, rebellion, or disaffection against the governing authority through speech, writing, or organizing. And in this case, organizing, because you had sergeants from these different platoons, pretty much, telling their soldiers pretty much to stand down, that they're not going to go fight in this illegal war that was not sanctioned by Congress. It says falling short of overt treason, and if you get, if you get charged with treason, they could put you on a firing squad or put you to death. Treason, the crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill the sovereign or overthrow the government. And remember what they showed you in that movie, Civil War, which I watched it a couple of times, I mean, they're giving it to you from a standpoint of news reporters, but nevertheless, the threat is real. You had the president and you had different factions of the army, some protecting the president, others fighting against you know, and then eventually they got him and they took him out. You see? Could that scenario happen? That could be possible. You know, but we're just going to sit back and watch and wait. It says key elements include intent to disrupt government operations, promoting violence, and inciting lawless action. It covers various forms such as seditious libel, written, and seditious conspiracy, organized action. So pretty much what these, you know, even though they're not inciting their troops to rise up against the government, but in standing down, and if they come for them, what if those same soldiers take up arms against those that's coming against them? See, so it's heating up, man. You know, we definitely in a great time of the prophecies are boiling. The prophecies are boiling over. You know, and you know the one thing that is really holding it back from fully, you know, actually just going straight out, you know, balls to the wall, as they say, is the MOTB, which is the micro C-hip. Once they get that in place, and this crisis right now, this whole situation, you know, is causing chaotic economic turmoil, you know, so that if this continues too long, then this could be the very thing or the linchpin that sets off, you know, the reset for the digital currency. And it doesn't matter if they get the micro C-hip in there right at the front. It just matters that they get the system in place and operating under those provisions. Later on, you know, whether it be 3 weeks later or a month later or a month and a half later, 2 months later, they can add the MOTB there, which is the micro C-hip, and eventually, you know, get everybody to have to comply or be cut out of the system. You see? So, you know, they don't care how it's done. They just want the MOTB system in place. Once it's in place, then they can add the necessary provisions to have everyone branded, you know, with this badge, you know, which is called the MARK in the scriptures, which is the micro C-hip, you know, which the Spirit has allowed us to identify, you know, scrutinize, you know, pretty much investigate and break it down to the least common denominator through all of the different Greek root words to identify that this device is in fact and indeed the micro C-hip. You know, and that's the only thing holding everything back. So going back to 2 Ezra 15 and 16, for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. Yeah, because they're not going to regard the legitimate government, because the legitimate government is being governed by you know, unrighteous leaders or the cruel Lord, you know. And the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Yeah, because it's going to be anarchy, which means there will be no rule of law. You know, every man's going to do according to what they feel is right. It says, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able, for because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Right here. So there's going to be food riots, you know, there's going to be race riots, there's going to be class wars, there's going to be, you know, seditions against the government, so on and so forth, because of the desperate situation and the desperate mindset that people find themselves in, especially when they go hungry. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their house with the sword, and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. You know, so this goes into something else down here. So that goes into the war that's going on over there in Iran right now, from the verse 20 all the way down to about somewhere around the 45th verse or so, you know, and that goes into that whole war. All right, so let's get into Isaiah 19, and I wanted to read it in the NLT. I was reading this, like I said, I bought the actual book so I can have a hard copy of it, you know, the NLT. I may even, you know, get a GNT, see if Elder Yashwamba, because I saw he had one. See if I get a GNT also. So Isaiah 19:1 in the NLT, the message came to me concerning Egypt. Now, this is not talking about ancient Egypt. This is not talking about the Egypt and the Pharaoh Nikos and all those that were around during the time of the Babylonian Empire, Assyrian Empire, Medo-Persian Empire, so on and so forth. This is talking about an Egypt in the future, which is America, which is Babylon the Great. Matter of fact, when we go to Revelation 11, for those of you that may not be familiar with this, 11 and 8, it says, and their dead bodies, meaning the Israelites' dead bodies, shall, meaning not physically dead, but spiritually dead, mentally dead, like we were at one time before the Lord breathed life into us, shall lie in the street of the great city. And what is this great city? America. You know, now people say, well, America is not a city, it's a country. Yeah, but how big is a city? A city is as big as its citizens. Anywhere you go in the world, no matter what part of America you're born in, no matter what state you're born in, you're known as a U.S. citizen or a citizen of the U.S. All right? So that means that the whole of America, the whole so-called country of America, is nothing more than a big city, and it is a great city. And I'm pretty sure if I look up that word great, it's going to go into megas, you know, which goes into the word great. Great, see, megas. Great, of the external form of the sensible appearance of things or persons. See, in particular, of space and its dimensions as respect. So it's a great city because it's very large. See, compass and extent, large, spacious. And America is large and spacious. It's 3,000 miles from east to west and 2,000 miles from north to south. Now, when we go to the word city, you got a great city. The word there's polis, where you get the word metropolis, mother city, polis, right? It says a city, one's native city, the city in which one lives, the heavenly Jerusalem, the abode of the blessed in heaven, the visible capital of heaven, the inhabitants of a city. In this case, it's a great city, a very big sized city. So this is talking about America, all right? And it's also not only just identified as a great city, it's also identified in Revelation 17 chapter as a great city that rules over all the kingdoms of the earth, pretty much. And America has sway over all these different nations. That's why it's slapping sanction on everybody. It's slapping them, you know, their descendants and their ancestors and their grandmothers. They slapping. This devil's slapping everybody with sanctions. He found a toy, you know, a hammer toy, and he's slapping everybody with it. You know, it says, which spiritually, not physically, but spiritually. It's not physically called this. It's not actually called this. It's spiritually called this. All right. It's called Sodom, which, you know, you got Sodom was the head city of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the other 5 cities, Zeboim, Zoar, and Admah, which were known for freakism. All the shit you see going on here and in Tel Aviv. Well, I don't know. I guess this year they ain't gonna have, if that war keeps going, they ain't gonna have that great pride that they have, you know, if you know what I mean. And it's also spiritually called Egypt. See? So America is spiritually known as Egypt. And that's why on the back of a dollar bill, right, which we've shown you many times, you'll see what? An Egyptian pyramid. You know, this is the pyramid of Cheops or Cheops. So it's also called the Great Pyramid of Giza, because he's the old Giza. All right, so there you go. So what in the F is an Egyptian pyramid doing on the back of a $1 bill? They didn't know this place was going to be spiritually called Egypt. They just set it up that way because the Lord put the Spirit on them. Just like they put, you know, Latin writing on the back, on these banners, on this banner here and up top here. Why? Because this also is known as Rome. You see? So on all levels, everything that this devil has done, The Lord made them do it that way. You know, and even DC, I don't know if they're going to say it. I believe they did before. It was Washington, DC, set up like Egypt. I don't know if they're going to say it. I believe they said it before. Washington, D.C. was not directly modeled on ancient Egyptian cities, but it heavily incorporates Egyptian-inspired architect and symbolism, often termed Egyptomania or Egyptian revival. Why? Because America is, the modern-day Egypt, or spiritually known as Egypt. And you have the term Egyptomania, which refers to the intense, recurrent Western fascination with ancient Egyptian culture. Hence, dollar bill, hence the Cleopatra needle, at Central Park. Hence, the Washington Monument, in D.C., which is an Egyptian obelisk, which is nothing more than the male phallic, because the Egyptians worship the act of sex, just like the modern Egyptian America and the modern Pharaoh do. It says it says the intense, recurrent Western fascination with ancient Egyptian culture, art, and motifs, often characterized by a madness or craze for incorporating Egyptian styles into modern life, architecture, and design. It peaked during the 19th century and again following the 1922 discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb. All right, and it's going to give you architectural influences. The trend saw the adoption of Egyptian forms like obelisks, sphinxes, and pyramid structures in Western landscapes and public buildings, and also in the back of a dollar bill. Which, if you try to do the research on it, they're going to say it's not modeled after the Egyptian pyramid of Cheops or none of that. But that's a lie. All right? That's a straight up, bold-faced lie. Because even Jordan Maxwell, when he was alive, when he was doing his, different sermons, so to speak, for lack of better words, he always would bring that out. That pyramid was modeled on the back of the dollar bill, was modeled after the pyramid of Cheops or Cheops. So cultural craze beyond building, this obsession of influenced fashion, jewelry, home decor, and popular culture. That's why you have a lot of jakes to this day still wearing what? The Ankh. And they think that it's because I'm Egyptian, I'm Egyptian, brother. Don't understand that the women that wore that, believed in having multiple men dealing with her, popping her. Since particularly during the Victorian era, historical drivers, the craze was fueled by Napoleon's 1798 Egyptian campaign and subsequent deciphering of the Rosetta Stone in 1822, which that was I can't remember the dude's name. It's a Frenchman that actually Francois Champollion. All right, he's the one that deciphered this. But those are hieroglyphics. You know what I mean? So pretty much you Egyptologists out there, you so-called black Egyptologists out there, that claim you're from Egypt and that the so-called Negroes in America are Egyptians, so on and so forth. You got all of your information and your studies from the so-called white man. It says global phenomenon, while heavily present in Europe, particularly France and Britain, which are two of the seven heads, it was also widespread in the United States, shaping the architectural, decorative, and fashion landscapes of the 19th and the early 20th centuries. See? It's all over the place. Egyptomania. All right, so Washington, D.C. was heavily modeled after Egyptian cities. So, going back to Revelation 11 and 8, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of their great city, America. The dead bodies are spiritually dead Israelites, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. How was the Lord crucified here? He was crossed out. Wasn't physically crucified, but he was actually, crossed out. Because to crucify someone is to cross them out. Like you could say, can someone be symbolically crucified? Yes, a person can be symbolically crucified, a concept representing intense social shame, internal psychological transformation, or voluntary spiritual sacrifice rather than physical death. This involves metaphorical nailing of the ego or public shaming, separating the individual from their former life or reputation. Right, because the former life and reputation of Yahushua is what? He is a so-called Negro. So when you type in so-called Jesus, right, what you gonna get when you go to images? So this is a crucifixion. This is a removal of the ancient way the Lord looks. See, they removed the Lord. They removed what he looks like. They took his face and erased his face out of history by putting the Edomite's face up, so-called white man's face up. So that's what? That's a symbolic crucifixion. So in the book of Revelation 11 and 8, it's talking about the Lord being crucified, meaning being crossed out. Staudao, to stake, to drive down stakes, to crucify one. And here you got metaphorically to crucify the flesh. You could crucify the flesh, meaning, like the scriptures say, mortify the deeds of the flesh, destroy its power utterly, the nature of the figure implying that the destruction is attended with intense pain. Right, because you have to fight the flesh. All right, I eat FDI flesh, inside joke. So you have to crucify the flesh, and which means you have to constantly fight the flesh. The spirit fighting the flesh. So that's another way of crucifixion. So Yahushua was crossed out here. The way he actually looked was crucified. All right. So this is spiritually known as Egypt, America. So Isaiah 19:1, this message came to me concerning Egypt. Look, the Lord is advancing against Egypt, riding on a swift cloud. This is talking about when Yahushua comes back, on a cloud. Revelation 1:7, behold, he cometh, meaning Yahushua, with clouds, and every eye shall see him. So Yahushua is going to come with the clouds of heaven. He's going to come in his gigantic, mountainous chariot, and the angels, the angels could come, separately, or they could, I forget the term, or they can pretty much break off from the actual fathership. There's a term for it. I can't think of it right now. So it could be that way, or they could just come separately. Regardless, it doesn't matter. The point is that they will be here. They're going to pull up. It says, and they also which pierced him, which is what you have, some individuals out there that's high-ranking officials, more than likely in the military, that actually pierce Yahushua, that's going to see him. And they're going to be like, oh shit, because the Lord's going to put in their memory back 2,000 years ago that they were the ones that did that to him. See? It says, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him, even so be true. So the Lord is going to come riding on the swift cloud. Shuttle ships, yeah, at the water, brother. Yep, shuttle ships. I knew somebody would come through. The idols of Egypt tremble. The hearts of the Egyptians melt with fear, right? So the idols of Egypt tremble because America is not established upon Judeo-Christian principles. They're established upon idol worship of these different nations. And that's why the idols of Egypt are going to tremble. Because everything that you've done, this witchcraft that you've pushed on the world, on the earth, is starting to lose that lackluster. You know, it's losing it's lackluster. 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 Lacking in vitality, force, or conviction. Uninspired or uninspiring. See? So it's lost, you know, the ability, you know, to captivate or enchant people like it used to. That's why the Lord says, stand up now with thy enchantments. See if there be anybody, ain't nobody out there gonna save you. You can see like a small hint of that now. This devil is crying out. He's throwing a big tantrum. You know, he's cursing out all these different NATO, you know, allies because they're not helping him, because they see you spiraling out of control. You unraveling in the spirit, Ak. Inside joke. No, he's unraveling, and they seeing it, and they don't want no parts of it, because they're tired of being, you know, World War I, World War II. They got pummeled. They don't want to, you know, bring their country down like that anymore. They don't want, you know, their streets and their buildings and to be hit with missiles and drones and all that. They ain't trying to see that. That's why they're not participating. They're stepping away from you because they seeing that you bugged out. So that spell that you had on the world at one time is wearing off. It says think dull, right? Because it's not brilliant anymore. The golden city has ceased. You know, that influence that you once had, that enchantment, you know, that alluring spirit is no longer working like it used to. People are not falling for it anymore. So it says the hearts of the Egyptians shall melt, the heart of the Egyptians melt with fear, right? Because you're going to, the people here in America, when they see Yahushua coming in the chariot and the angels in their chariots, they're going, the scriptures say, men's hearts failing them for fear, for looking at the things that are coming upon the earth. I will make Egyptians fight against Egyptians. Matter of fact, let's see. I'm going to come right back. I just want to see. You know what? I got one even better. Since I'm in the GNT, since I had to have them. What is that? Isaiah 19. The Lord says, I will stir up civil war in Egypt, and turn brother against brother and neighbor against neighbor. So this is what we're seeing right now. Chaos, turmoil, and dissension. All right? Chaos, turmoil, and dissension. It says rival cities will fight each other and rival kings will struggle for power. And pretty much that's what we saw in that movie Civil War. You know, you had one faction of the military and government against another faction of the military and government, and they were fighting each other. What? To take the president down, to set up a real president. You know, not a criminal, not a crook. So back in Isaiah 19 and 2, I will make Egyptian fight against Egyptians, brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, city against city, province against province. Right? They go your race wars, your riots, your class wars, so on and so forth. You know, sedition against the government. The Egyptians will lose heart, and I will confuse their plans, right? Because they have a plan that was put in place, an agenda. And that agenda up until this point has been working, but now the wisdom of these rulers is failing them, because you know the people are there's glitches happening. You know, and people are starting to see. You know, they're starting to look behind the curtain. You know, the curtain is open, and they're looking like, oh shit, wait a minute, something ain't right here. And they're starting to, you know, slowly but surely wake up from that enchanting spell that you had over them. They will plead with their idols for wisdom and call on spirits, mediums, and those who consult the spirits of the dead. Yeah, you're going to be trying everything you can to stay in power. But it's not going to work because your time is up. You've been weighing the balance and you've been found wanting. You had a set time to rule, and now that time is over. So Isaiah 47 and 12, stand now with thine enchantments and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from thy youth. So from the time America was established, you've been pretty much using witchcraft in whatever fashion it was, casting spells, setting up your empire. But it ain't working anymore. If so be thou shalt be able to profit, if so be thou mayest prevail. Because you're not going to prevail. Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Right, so they're having counsel after counsel after counsel, meeting after meeting after meeting, trying to come up with solutions, how to get America back to the status that it had. It ain't going to happen. Why is that? Because the Lord stripped that from you. Let's go real quick to Isaiah 14 and 5. The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. Matter of fact, let's see what it says here. Isaiah 14 and 5. The Lord hath ended the power of the evil rulers. See? So the Lord ended the power of the evil rulers. So no longer do you have that power that you once had. The Lord, back in Isaiah 14:5 in the KJV, the Lord had broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. And this was in the GNT. Same scripture. The Lord hath ended the power of the evil rulers. So that's why you can't go but so far. So in Isaiah 47, it says, thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers, the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators, all these different witches, warlocks, individuals that gave you all this counsel, let them stand up. Stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. Because no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to sustain, you're not going to be able to regain that status that you once had. Why? Because the Lord cut you down. He cut your rulership. Now your rulership is that broken staff that you're leaning on, and it has all kind of splinters and jagged edges that is tearing your ass up. And eventually you're going to say, to hell with it. Behold, they shall be as stubble. Yeah, because they're going to be burnt up wherever helps you. The fire shall burn them. That's the missiles, the destruction, and the lasers from the chariots. They shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. So no one is going to be able to deliver themselves from this destruction. And none of them are going to be able to help you. There's no stimulus package. There's no counsel among these individuals. There's nothing that can be done to get you back into that position that you once had. And this crazy, erratic move that Trump's been making with this war has even cemented to the world more that this place is finished. That it doesn't, wield the power that they had. Oh yeah, they still got the greatest military on the planet, but their counsel, their decision making, and everything else that goes along with it is faltering, because the Lord is stripping these individuals from that spirit, and it's also taking their balls from them. Because anyone that stands up to Trump, they get fired, because he's a big fucking overgrown 80-something-year-old spoiled brat, that if he doesn't get his way, you get fired. This is not a rational leader. This is not a rational thinking individual. This dude is all about himself. He doesn't give a fuck about anybody else. And I'm pretty sure that anyone that has known him for many years will tell you the same exact thing. There shall not be a coal to warm at, no fire to sit before it. Right, because there will be nothing left on the soils of America. Everything's going, this place, mountainous regions, everything's going to be a flat ground. No more Appalachian Mountains, no more Bear Mountain, no more, Great Adventures, no more Six Flags. no more Disney World, no more White House, Pentagon, no more, Washington, D.C., no more L.A., no more, New York City, no more anything. Everything's going to become a flat plane. So the Lord's going to level this place out from east to west, from north to south. Thus shall they be unto thee with whom thou hast labored. Right. So all of your, anyone that's here on the soils of America that did business with you or does business with you, they're going to be melted here. But others are going to split. Even thy merchants from thy youth, they shall wander every one to his quarter, none shall save thee. So everybody's they're leaving you. All of your allies are stepping back. And they're bound by, Article 5 of the, I forget what the name of that is, the UN Charter, I think it is. They're bound by that. I think it's a UN Charter or NATO, something like that. But they're not abiding by it. Why? Because this is, you're moving erratically. And that's the Lord putting a perverse spirit in you. Taking your mind, giving you a beastly mind to where you're just acting on impulse. You're not acting with wisdom. You're not acting with knowledge. You're not acting like a leader of a great, of a giant, country. You're making all these erratic moves. That's the Lord, causing you to do this to speed things up. Because we've been praying, man. We've been praying for the Lord to take this place out. To let, this shit increase and let everything go down, the way the Lord said it will go down so that he could come and deliver us, So don't think those prayers are just going up and not being heard. Scriptures say that our prayer, the prayers of the saints, are being offered before the Lord, Yahweh Bashem El Shai, with incense. The angels are bringing those up to the Lord, And the Lord said, yeah, I know. Just a little longer, my sons, a little longer, my daughters. I got you. I know. Don't you think the Lord knows? You think if we're fed up with these devils, you don't think the Lord's fed up with these devils? But the Lord is bound by his word, and he's not going to break his word, not even for his great name's sake. So going back to Isaiah 19 and 4 in the NLT, I will hand Egypt over to a hard, cruel master. Matter of fact, let's see what it says here. GNT. I will hand the Egyptian over to a tyrant, to a cruel king who will rule them. I, the Lord, Yahweh Bashem El Shai Almighty, have spoken. All right? So the Lord is the one that's doing this. A fierce king will rule them, says Yahweh Bashem El Shai, the Lord of heaven's armies. The water of the Nile will fail to rise, flood the fields. The riverbed will be parched and dry. And this is not dealing with the actual Nile River. This is dealing with, these different fishermen. Matter of fact, let's hit the button, the KJV. And the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried. Meaning, you're going to have these fishermen that are not going to have, not going to be able to be sustained. What is it? This should be a cry from the. It might be in the same chapter. Nope. Zephaniah 1 and 10. And it shall come to pass in that day, Barakateh Yahweh Shem El Shai, saith the Lord Yahweh Shem El Shai, that there shall be the noise of a cry from the fish gate, and the howling from the second, and a great crashing from the hills. Right. So pretty much the economy is going to be so bad, that you're going to have individuals that's going to have to give up their business and just, fend for themselves. Farmers are not going to be able to farm because if this thing keeps going, they're not going to be able to get fertilizer. It's going to be too expensive, and it's not going to be worth them buying it for that exorbitant amount of money, planting for an exorbitant amount of money, and then to get a return, they're going to have to spend or sell their goods for an exorbitant amount of money, which the average consumer is not going to pay because they're not going to have it to pay. Here it is, you're going to have to, I'm just, throwing a crazy, number out there. You want to go get a squash, you got to pay $20 for one squash. Ain't nobody going to pay that for one squash. So squash that shit, homeboy. It says, How the inhabitants of Maktesh, which was a merchant city, that sold gold and everything, believed that it was in Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. For all the merchant people are cut down, all they that bear silver are cut off. And this is dealing with, the modern, stock exchange market, which is down in Wall Street, which is pretty much the capital stock market of the world. That's why you had on the soils of America, World Trade Center, which is the finances of the whole entire world, the global finance of the world. Everything is traded through America. Everything is traded in U.S. dollars. That's no coincidence, because the Lord said that this city will rule over the kings of the earth. There's no mistakes, only prophecies. All right, so going back, Isaiah 19:6, the canals of the Nile will dry up, which means you're gonna these different fishermen are not gonna be able to function. They're not going to be able to sell their wares. And the streams of Egypt will stink with rotting reeds and rushes. Right, like even now, you have certain places where you have farms that don't have enough workers to pluck, the vegetation. So it's going bad because this devil ran everybody off. And the greenery along the riverbank and all the crops along the river will dry up and blow away. The fishermen will lament for lack of work. See? Those who cast hooks into the Nile will groan. It's not talking about the Nile. It's talking about, just in general. And those who use nets will lose heart. Yeah. Because, fishing is a very lucrative business. But if you can't sell your goods, if everything is too expensive, you ain't going to be able to make money. There will be no flax for the harvesters, no thread for the weavers. They will be in despair, and all the workers will be sick at heart. So, this situation right here is causing great havoc economically worldwide. And unlike the lies that are being taught in American media, the Strait of Hormuz is not closed. It's only closed to American and Israeli traffic. It's not closed to China and Japan, Russia, Taiwan, and all them different nations that do not have a league or allied with America. Anyone that's allied with America, if you don't get, you're gonna get blown out the water if you try to go through there. And even if you're not allied with America and you don't get permission, you're gonna get blown out the water. Them Iranians are not playing. It says, what fools are the officials of Zoan? That's your wise men. These were the ancient wise men of Egypt. So today, sometimes it calls them Zoan. Sometimes it calls them Chaldeans. Sometimes it calls them Magi's or magicians, like in Egypt. It says their best counsels to the king of Egypt is stupid and wrong. And that's why he made that stupid, erratic move. Because he wanted to do it anyway. Why? Because he's blackmailed. He's compromised. So like it for a minute. We get some of the delicious wool. The dude is compromised, man. He's a big spoiled brat with a rattle. And he's trying to knock everybody in the head. You want me to knock you in the head? It's a like an inside joke. Will they still boast to Pharaoh of their wisdom? Will they dare brag about all their wise ancestors? Yeah, there's nothing you could do. Why? Because this is of the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, and he's causing and stirring everything up. It says, where are your wise counselors, Pharaoh? Let them tell you what the Most High plans, what the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai of heaven's armies is going to do to Egypt. Because that's at the end of the day, let your Paula Whites and your different Higgies, if he's still alive, and your different Joel Osteens, but you don't even hear nothing about that, and your different televangelists that are supposed to be spiritual guides and spiritual leaders and supposed to tell you about what's happening. Let them tell you what the Most High's plans are. Like the elder Pastor said, why can't Paul or White tell Trump you shouldn't go to war with these people because this is World War III. This is this is Ezekiel the 38th chapter, and if you go to war with them, the Russians are going to get involved. They're going to kick your ass. And if you go to 2 Ezra 15, the Carmanians, which are the Iranians, they're going to team up with the Arabians and they're going to kick your ass too. Because they're all a bunch of goddamn fools. And they don't know prophecy, as the elder pastor has been pointing out for years. The officials of Zion are fools, and the officials of Memphis are deluded. The leaders of the people have led Egypt astray, and that's what they've done. And that's why America's in the turmoilic case it's in, if that's even a word. It's in a catastrophic mind state. And people are getting desperate. They were already desperate from 2020 to now. And it's getting worse. And this devil promised to when he got in there that he was going to make it better. And he's made it far worse than what it was. At this point, it would have been better to have that bug out, Biden in there, than to have this devil in there. But we're glad that the Lord allowed this devil to get in there. Because he's speeding everything up using this one fool. The Lord has sent a spirit of foolishness on them. So all their suggestions are wrong, see? Everything that they try to do and try to counsel this devil on, it's all wrong. They cause Egypt to stagger like a drunk in his vomit. Yeah, that's why 1 minute Taco's talking shit. One minute Nero's is macho, and another time Taco is bluffing, running back. So this guy is not stable. He's not mentally stable. It says, there is nothing Egypt can do. All are helpless. The head and the tail, the noble palm, branch, and the lowly reed. So everything is there's nothing sound, in this whole, governmental system. In that day, Egyptians will be as weak as women. They will cower in fear beneath the upraised fist of the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai of heaven's armies. So they're going to be, when they see Yahweh Shai pulling up with the angels, they're going to be like, oh shit. They're going to be shitting on themselves. That's why it says here in Jeremiah 50 and 30, the mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. And that's why right now they're not even, you have a great dissension among the military branches. Against the current, regime, because they're seeing that now this ain't right. This war is not right. The ways that we're going about it is not right. And they're taking a stand, and it's infecting other troops within the military to do the same. It's one thing if a country attacks you and you have to, defend yourself, but it's another thing when you start shit, because of another country. Now you got to send. Now you ain't going out there. You ain't sending your sons and daughters out there. You're gonna send the other people, the common folks' sons and daughters out there to get blown up, get deleted. Come back with missing limbs. Come back with a fucked up mind state. Of all the shit that they saw. They have to be on medication for the rest of their life. They have remained in their holds. See, and this is what's happening right now. They're remaining in their holds. They're like, nope, they refusing orders to go to war, to get ready for war. Their might hath failed. They became as women. They have burned her dwelling places. Her bars are broken. Yeah, because this place is eventually destined for destruction. One post shall run to meet another, and one messenger to meet another, to show the king of Babylon that his city is taken at one end. So remember, in the Apocryphy, in 2 Ezra 15 and 30, it says, also the Carmanians raging in wrath, which are the Iranians, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and the elder, or the up-and-coming elder, the priest Yashamoth, went into the nature of a boar. That a boar is super dangerous, but when they feel threatened or when they feel cornered, that's when they really go crazy. They let them tusks fly. It says, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them. With who? With the Arabians. So the Carmenians or the Iranians and the Ishmaelites are going to join forces to do what? And shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. So don't be surprised if they, cause something to happen through what they call sleeper cells, and cause some type of havoc to happen in a major city or major cities in America. Because it's prophecy. We just read it here in Isaiah 19:16. In that day, the Egyptian be as weak as women. I'm sorry, this wasn't it. It was Jeremiah. It was Jeremiah 51:31. One post shall run to meet another, and one messenger to meet another, to show the king of Babylon that his city is taken at one end. See? And it says, that the passages are stopped, and the reeds they have burned with fire, and the men of war are affrighted. Because the men of war in America are not built like the other, nations. The other nations, they're built for war. And you got to remember, these nations around the world have been bred since they were children for war. They've been training since they were children. They're ready. Their mindset is like they're ready, whatever they got to do to die for their country. The average American is not thinking like that. The average American is fat, dumb, lazy, only thinking about themselves. A bad day to them is when they can't get their 24 pack, of ice cream sandwiches, because they didn't have no money to get it that day, so they had to settle for the 12 pack. That's a bad day to them. These other nations, they're bred for adversity. They've lived adversity from childhood to adulthood. So they're ready for whatever. That's why they told you before you even went up in there, they said, look, we're just letting you know, you come up in here, you're gonna get war. You want war, you're gonna get war. They know they can't beat America, but guess what? They can hold out. And they could cause massive damage, which they have been causing. Casualties are low on the Iranian side, against America and Israel, because they're not looking to get numbers. They're not bloodthirsty individuals. They care for human life. But they are hitting major arteries, like your satellites, your communications, your military bases, your embassies, and now you want to F around and hit their utilities and oil spots and all that. They're going to do the same to you. It says, Isaiah 19:17, just to speak the name of Israel will terrorize them, for the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahshua of heaven's armies has laid out his plans against them. Yeah, and that's what's happening right now. The Lord is setting us up in order, and he's showing us to the world. And these devils are going to be nervous, because they are nervous. That's why you send your vocab Malones and your two clowns, the magpies, to try to, the TTAK, the Truth After Knowledge, Abu Kamar, them clowns like that, to come against the Israelites, because we have the truth. The Lord has risen us up, put his light in us and risen us up to bring out this word. And they're like, oh shit, because they thought that once One West was done away with, that would be the end of the Israelites, which they've been trying to put an end to these teachings for a long time. They've been trying to pay off, the teachers back then for a long time, which they send them packing. Some of them took the bag, others didn't. And they figured that once that school was shut down, that's why they wanted that shut down. That's why that's why they left. They could have kept that open and still had another school down the street. But them devils wanted all of that shut down, because there was too much power coming from that one little sanctuary. And that's what you see happening right now. Look at from that little mustard seed what the Lord has created worldwide, with all these different camps around the world teaching Israel. And they're teaching Israel the right way, most of them, dealing with, as far as, the core teachings of One West. And it all came from One West, Harlem, New York, a small little building, small little sanctuary, to what you see today, this great, awakening. Revelation 11:11, and after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from the Most High entered into them, into who? Into the elect. And they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. Yeah. So that's why it said in Isaiah 19:17, just to speak the name of Israel will terrorize them. Not talking about the name Israel, like in the land of Israel. No, the Hebrew Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. It says, and they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. And this is when we're going to be leaving the soils of America. Lord's will we be the elect. When the Lord pulls up in his chariot and says, come up hither. That's when we be delivered. That's when we be saved. That's when we know if we follow on to know the Lord. That's when we'll know if we are the elect or not. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, right? Because you have what Esau calls a tractor beam, where you're going to have the elect going up into the chariot of Yahushua. And their enemies beheld them. So the enemies are going to be looking up. And they're going to have a Wisdom of Solomon, the 5th chapter moment. It's like, oh shit, we fools. We counted their lives to be madness, and the end to be without honor. How are they numbered among the children of the Lord? Because we're not looked at. We're looked at because every Jake out there, whether you're so-called Negro, Latino, or Native American Indian, is looked at in the same light as these YNs, as these Shirleys and Keishas, and Nene and Maria La Gorda and all that shit. Looked at as beaners, no good for nothing. But they don't understand that among that number and among those that are cursed, the Lord has an elect that he's polishing up. And the same hour was there a great earthquake. And what's going to cause this earthquake? The missiles. The great, that great pounding of the missiles on the earth, and that one pounding after another is going to cause a reverberation to go all throughout the planet, all over the earth, to what's going to make the earth rock to and fro like a drunkard. But the Lord is going to have the angels hold it in place so that it don't explode. Because this is the Lord's way of taking out America, taking out the land of Israel, and also destroying all of the infrastructures of all of these different nations that they have established. Because Yahushua's kingdom is coming to be established. And all other empires got to be put down. And that's why it says in the 15th verse, matter of fact, and the 10th part of the city fell, and this could be also what we were reading about a portion of the land of the Assyrians being taken out, which is not, because America is broken up into 10 parts in the FEMA regions, but the 10th part is only like 1/10 of it, 1/10, like 1/10 of a mile. Because we used to break it down as it being all of America, because America is split up into 10, but it says the 10th part, not the 10 parts. And in the earthquake, and the Elder Pastor pointed that out. And in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, meaning a complete number of men and women. And the remnant were affrighted, which are the elect, and gave glory to the power of heaven. Why? Because they're going to be in the chariots, looking down, glorifying the Lord, praising the Lord, but still being a little shook from what they're seeing. Because remember, when the prophets saw the destruction of America, they were nervous. Some of them fainted. Some of them, got sick. Some of them had great troublings in their mind. Some of them prayed that they would be protected in that day. The second war was past, and behold, the third war cometh quickly. There's World War II into World War III. And World War III is going to culminate when when the MOTB, which is the microchip, is fully implemented, and the World War III fully gets going. The missiles start flying, and Yahushua pulls up with the angels, and they light this place up. It says, and the seventh angel sounded, which is the final trumpet, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, and of his anointed, and he shall reign forever and ever. So that's what Yahushua is coming to do. He's coming to cement his reward, his the promise that the Most High made unto him. Sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. And that's why all of the powers of heaven will be shaken, because all of the powers of heaven will be subordinated under Yahweh Bashem Yahushai and under the Israelites. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters were edified. To the next time I say, Shalom.